Before we dive into my story, please hit that subscribe button and join our community to stay updated on more gripping tales of corporate justice. Let's get started. I still remember the day I walked into my job at Apex Corp, full of ambition. It was a sleek office, all glass and steel, buzzing with energy. I was hired as a junior analyst, eager to prove myself. My manager, Greg, seemed like a mentor at first. He had a charming smile and a knack for rallying the team. But something always felt off about him. I couldn't put my finger on it initially. The late-night meetings, the hushed phone calls. I brushed it off as corporate life. My role was to crunch numbers, not question the higher-ups. Yet, the unease grew with every passing week. I started noticing discrepancies in the financial reports. Small ones at first, but they piled up. Greg always had an excuse. Software glitches, he'd say. I wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in. By month 3, I was determined to dig deeper. My cubicle became my investigation hub, late nights spent poring over spreadsheets. I'd stay after hours, the office eerily quiet except for the hum of my computer. The numbers didn't add up. Millions were being funneled somewhere. I cross-referenced invoices, tracked payments, and found shell companies. These weren't clerical errors. This was deliberate. Greg's signature was on every questionable transaction. I felt a chill realizing what I'd stumbled upon. Fraud, plain and simple, orchestrated by my boss. I confided in a colleague, Sarah, who warned me to stay quiet. "You don't mess with Greg," she said nervously. But I couldn't unsee the truth. I started documenting everything meticulously. Emails, memos, transaction logs. I saved them all. My gut told me this would blow up soon. The deeper I dug, the more brazen Greg's scheme appeared. He was siphoning funds into offshore accounts. Fake vendor contracts, inflated expenses. It was a masterclass in deception. I found a pattern linking him to a shady consultancy firm. The firm didn't even have a real office address. I felt like I was in a thriller movie, except this was my life. I started to notice Greg watching me more closely. He'd linger by my desk, asking vague questions about my work. Paranoia set in. Was he on to me? I kept my findings on a hidden USB drive. Every night, I'd back it up, terrified of losing the evidence. I knew I was risking my job, maybe more. But silence wasn't an option anymore. One Monday, Greg called me into his office, his tone unusually cold. He sat behind his desk, eyes narrowing as he spoke. "You've been working late a lot," he said, almost accusingly. I played it cool, claiming I was just catching up. My heart was racing, but I kept my face neutral. He didn't push, but I could feel the suspicion. That week, I noticed my computer had been accessed remotely. Files I hadn't touched were opened. Someone was checking my work. I started using a personal laptop for my investigation. The office felt like a minefield now. Every conversation with Greg was a test. I had to act normal while compiling a dossier on his crimes. The weight of it all was crushing, but I kept going. I reached out to an old college friend, a lawyer named Mike, for advice. Over coffee, I laid out what I'd found without naming Greg directly. Mike's face grew serious as he listened. "You're in deep," his exact words. He urged me to gather ironclad evidence before making a move. Whistleblowing, he said, was a legal minefield. I needed proof that couldn't be disputed. Back at the office, I doubled my efforts. I found emails where Greg instructed accountants to adjust figures. One even hinted at a kickback from the consultancy firm. I felt sick reading it. My boss was a crook. Mike helped me draft a plan to approach the company's board. The stakes were sky high now. The turning point came when I found a smoking gun, a hidden ledger. It was buried in an encrypted file on the company server. I spent hours cracking it with software I'd learned about online. The ledger detailed every fraudulent transaction, signed off by Greg. It was like finding a criminal's diary. I copied it to my USB and sent a backup to Mike. That night, I barely slept, haunted by what came next. Confronting Greg wasn't an option. He'd bury me. The board was my only shot, but they were his allies. I had to be strategic, precise. I started drafting an anonymous report to tip them off. Every word had to be perfect to avoid blowback. The office Christmas party was my cover to slip into Greg's office. While everyone was distracted, I accessed his computer. I knew his password. He'd left it on a post-it once, careless. I found more emails, more proof of his fraud. He was reckless, assuming no one would look. I downloaded everything, my hands shaking the whole time. Back at the party, Greg was laughing, clinking glasses, oblivious. I felt like a spy in enemy territory. The next day, I finalized my report to the board. I included every damning piece of evidence. Mike reviewed it, calling it bulletproof. I sent it anonymously via a secure email service. Then I waited, heart in my throat, for the fallout. Days passed with no response, and I was losing hope. Had the board ignored my report? Or worse, were they in on it? Greg seemed smugger than usual, untouched. I kept my head down, but the tension was unbearable. Then, one morning, security escorted me to HR. My stomach dropped as they handed me a termination letter. Performance issues, they claimed, but I knew better. Greg had found out. He didn't confront me directly, just got rid of me. I was furious but not surprised. As I packed my desk, Sarah whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't blame her. Fear ruled that place. I left the building, jobless but not defeated. My evidence was still out there. At home, I regrouped with Mike's help. Losing my job lit a fire under me. I wasn't just exposing Greg for myself anymore. It was for everyone he'd cheated. Mike connected me with a journalist friend, Emma, who worked for a major outlet. I shared my evidence, anonymized to protect myself. Emma was floored by the scale of the fraud. She promised to investigate further and keep my name out of it. Meanwhile, I filed for unemployment and tightened my budget. The stress was relentless, but I felt alive with purpose. Greg thought firing me would silence me. He was wrong. I was just getting started, and his empire was about to crumble. Emma's investigation moved fast. She had sources inside Apex Corp. She confirmed the board had received my report but sat on it. Greg's influence was strong, but cracks were forming. Employees started whispering about financial irregularities. Emma's outlet published a teaser article, vague but pointed. It mentioned alleged misconduct at Apex Corp. Social media exploded with speculation. I watched from the sidelines, heart pounding. Greg must have been sweating now. I kept feeding Emma new details, like a leaked email where Greg bragged about cooking the books. The pressure was building, and I could feel it. My termination wasn't the end. It was the spark. Corporate justice was coming. The first big article dropped a week later, and it was explosive. Emma's piece named Greg explicitly, citing credible evidence of fraud. The ledger I'd found was the centerpiece, though my identity stayed hidden. Apex Corp's stock plummeted overnight. Employees were in a panic, flooding X with posts about the scandal. I felt a rush reading them. People were waking up. Greg released a statement denying everything, calling it a smear campaign. But the evidence was too strong. I smiled, knowing he was cornered. The board couldn't ignore it anymore. They announced an internal investigation, but I knew it was damage control. The truth was out, and I'd made it happen. I started getting anonymous messages from former colleagues. Some thanked me, others warned me to watch my back. Greg had powerful friends, they said. I installed extra locks on my apartment door. Paranoia was my new normal, but I refused to back down. Emma kept digging, uncovering more of Greg's network. The consultancy firm was linked to a bigger fraud ring. Federal investigators got involved, and I was quietly thrilled. My evidence had sparked a domino effect. I met with Mike to discuss legal protection. Whistleblower laws were tricky, but I had a case. Losing my job was just the start. This was war. The investigation gained traction, and Greg's facade began to crack. He took a leave of absence, claiming personal reasons. I laughed when I read the press release. He was running scared, and I loved it. Emma's team found bank records tying him to offshore accounts. Every new article tightened the noose. I started a blog anonymously to share my side of the story. It got traction on X, with people calling for justice. I was careful, never revealing my identity. The blog became my outlet, a way to process the chaos. I wrote about the betrayal, the fear, and the fight. Readers connected, sharing their own corporate horror stories. One night, I got a call from an unknown number, Greg's voice on the line. He didn't say his name, but I'd know that smug tone anywhere. "You're making a mistake," he hissed, then hung up. My blood ran cold, but I recorded it. Mike said it could be evidence of intimidation. I sent it to Emma, who passed it to the feds. Greg was unraveling, making sloppy moves. The next day, news broke of his arrest. Handcuffs, perp walk, the works. I watched the footage on repeat, feeling vindicated. He thought he was untouchable, but I'd brought him down. The office wasn't my battlefield anymore. It was the world. The trial was a media circus, and I stayed in the shadows. Emma's articles kept my evidence front and center. Greg's defense team tried to discredit the ledger, but it was airtight. Witnesses came forward, former colleagues who'd been too scared before. Sarah testified about Greg's pressure tactics. I felt proud, knowing I'd given them courage. The prosecution built a case around my findings. Every day, I checked X for updates, seeing public outrage grow. Apex Corp's board resigned in disgrace. The company was hemorrhaging money, facing lawsuits. I'd exposed a house of cards, and it was collapsing. My unemployment checks barely covered rent, but I felt rich with purpose. Greg's conviction came 6 months later, guilty on multiple counts. Fraud, embezzlement, the list went on. He faced years in prison, his reputation in ashes. I watched the verdict from a coffee shop, tears in my eyes. Not sadness, relief. I'd lost my job, my savings, my sense of safety. But I'd won something bigger, justice. Emma's final article credited an anonymous whistleblower. That was me, and it felt like enough. My blog gained followers, people inspired by my story. I started consulting for whistleblowers, helping others fight back. My life was different now, but I was stronger for it. Apex Corp never recovered, filing for bankruptcy a year later. I read about it while sipping coffee, a small smile on my face. The company had been rotten, and I'd helped clean it out. Former colleagues reached out, some apologetic, others grateful. Sarah sent me a long email, confessing her guilt for staying silent. I forgave her. She'd been trapped, like so many. I kept blogging, now under my real name. The anonymity wasn't necessary anymore. X became my platform, where I connected with others exposing corporate corruption. My voice mattered, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Greg's downfall was just the beginning. The feds offered me a settlement for wrongful termination. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to start over. Mike negotiated hard, ensuring I was protected. I used the money to fund my consulting work. Whistleblowers reached out from all over, sharing their stories. I taught them how to document evidence, stay safe, and fight back. Every case felt like a piece of my own redemption. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a guide. The corporate world was full of Gregs, but I was arming people to take them down. My blog turned into a podcast, amplifying the message. Justice wasn't a dream. It was a movement. Looking back, I don't regret a thing, not even losing my job. It forced me to see the world for what it was. Messy, unfair, but changeable. Greg thought he'd silenced me, but he only made me louder. My story inspired others to speak up, to fight. I got messages from strangers saying I'd given them hope. That was worth more than any paycheck. I still check X daily, engaging with my growing community. Corporate fraud thrives in silence, but I broke that silence. My life isn't perfect. I'm still rebuilding. But I'm free, and I'm fighting. That's more than Greg can say. The corporate world hasn't changed much, but I have. I'm not the naive analyst who walked into Apex Corp years ago. I'm a warrior, scarred but unbroken. My work now is about empowering others to expose corruption. Every whistleblower I help feels like a victory. Greg's in prison, but there are more like him out there. I'm ready for them, and so are the people I've inspired. My podcast is growing, my blog is thriving. I've found my purpose in the ashes of my old life. Corporate justice isn't just a phrase, it's my mission. Game over for Greg, but my game's just beginning. The aftermath of the scandal left me reflecting on trust. I believed in Apex Corp, in Greg, in the system. That trust was shattered, but it built something stronger, resolve. I learned to question everything, to follow the money. My consulting work grew, with clients from startups to multinationals. Each case was a chance to right a wrong. I started speaking at conferences, sharing my story. People listened, inspired to act. X was still my pulse, where I saw others exposing fraud. The platform amplified my voice, connecting me with allies. I wasn't alone anymore. The fight against corporate greed was global, and I was part of it. One day, I got an email from a former Apex Corp board member. He apologized, admitting they'd ignored my report at first. Greg had them wrapped around his finger. The email was closure, proof my work mattered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My victory was in the headlines, in Greg's cell. I kept pushing forward, training whistleblowers. My podcast hit 1 million downloads, a milestone I never imagined. Listeners sent stories of their own battles, fueling my drive. I hired a small team to manage the workload. We were a force, exposing corruption one case at a time. The corporate world wasn't ready for us. I started teaching workshops on spotting fraud, virtual and in person. Attendees ranged from employees to executives, all eager to learn. I shared my tools, how to trace transactions, secure evidence, stay safe. Mike joined me sometimes, offering legal insights. We were a team, dismantling corrupt systems. My blog evolved into a full website, with resources for whistleblowers. Ex-users shared it widely, calling it a game changer. I felt proud but never complacent. Every victory reminded me of the cost. My job, my peace. Yet, I'd do it all again. The fight was worth it, every single time. A new case came my way, a tech startup with a shady CEO. The pattern was familiar. Fake invoices, hidden accounts. I guided the whistleblower, a young coder named Alex. We built a case together, using my old playbook. When the story broke, the CEO resigned, and Alex was hailed as a hero. I stayed behind the scenes, smiling. This was my purpose, empowering others to win. My podcast featured Alex's story, inspiring thousands. X lit up with support, hashtags trending. I realized my fight wasn't just about Greg anymore. It was about a system that let people like him thrive. I was changing that system, one voice at a time. The threats never fully stopped, but I learned to live with them. Anonymous emails, vague warnings, they were part of the territory. Mike helped me stay legally protected. I installed better security, stayed vigilant. Fear was real, but it didn't control me. My followers on X became my shield, calling out trolls who targeted me. Their support kept me grounded. I kept sharing my story, unfiltered. Every post, every episode, was a middle finger to the Gregs of the world. My consulting firm grew, with clients in Europe and Asia. I was building a legacy, not just a career. Reflecting on Apex Corp, I saw how naive I'd been. I thought hard work was enough, that loyalty mattered. The scandal taught me the truth. Power protects itself. But it also showed me that truth can win. My evidence brought down a titan, and I wasn't done. I started mentoring young whistleblowers, teaching them resilience. My workshops were packed. My website a hub for change. X was my megaphone, amplifying every victory. I wasn't just a former analyst, I was a movement. People trusted me because I'd lived it. Every scar was proof I'd fought and won. A documentary crew reached out, wanting to tell my story. I hesitated. Spotlight wasn't my style. But Mike and Emma convinced me it could inspire more. We filmed over months, retracing my journey. The crew dug into Greg's fraud, interviewing colleagues. When it aired, X exploded with reactions. Viewers called me a hero, though I didn't feel like one. I was just someone who refused to stay quiet. The documentary boosted my platform, bringing more clients. My team expanded, and we took on bigger cases. Corporate justice wasn't a dream, it was my reality, and I was shaping it. Years after Greg's conviction, I visited Apex Corp's old office. It was abandoned, windows boarded up. I stood there, remembering the fear, the late nights. It felt like a lifetime ago. I'd rebuilt my life, stronger than before. My consulting firm was thriving, my podcast a global hit. X remained my community, where I shared every step. I wasn't rich, but I was free. Every case I took on honored that freedom. Greg thought he'd broken me, but he'd built me. I walked away from the ruins, head high. The past was gone, but my fight lived on. Today, I'm working on a book about my journey. It's not just about Greg or Apex Corp, it's about power, truth, and fighting back. Writing it feels like therapy, a way to process the chaos. My readers on X are excited, already pre-ordering. I'm also launching a non-profit to fund whistleblower legal fees. Mike's on board, and we're building a network. The corporate world won't change overnight, but we're chipping away. Every case, every story, weakens the system that protects fraud. I'm not alone anymore. Thousands stand with me. Together, we're rewriting the rules of corporate justice. This is my story, but it's not the end. It's a call to action for anyone trapped in a corrupt system. Speak up, fight back, don't let fear win. I lost my job, my security, but I gained a purpose. Greg's game is over, but mine is just getting started. I'm still on X, sharing stories, exposing truth. My consulting firm, my podcast, my book, they're all weapons in this fight. Corporate justice isn't a fantasy, it's a battle we can win. Join me, and let's take down the next Greg. Together, we'll make sure the truth always comes out. Game over for corruption, our move now. Thanks for following my journey. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and justice. Let's keep the fight alive together.